Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Anna. Welcome back to my channel. Throughout my years of experience, I've encountered many strange medical cases. Stories that seemed impossible to explain. But with perseverance and medical knowledge, I've managed to uncover the truth behind these mysteries. Today, I'm going to share with you the story of the mysterious ears. Cases that seemed bizarre, but had surprisingly logical explanations. Let's dive right in. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you won't miss any of my upcoming stories. In a small town nestled along the banks of Poland's Vistula River, where winding cobblestone streets led past pastel-colored old houses, a man named Kazimierz Nowak lived a quiet yet mysterious life. Kazimierz, or Kazik, as he was known by those who frequented the weekend flea market, was a retired watchmaker residing in a two-story wooden house covered in ivy on the outskirts of Krakowskie Przedmieście. He was around 60 years old, his hair already turning silver, and his pale blue eyes always seemed to carry a sorrowful gaze, as if peering through time itself. But most peculiarly, he had a habit that no one in town dared to ask him about directly. He never cleaned his ears. It began as a whisper among housewives gathered in the town square early in the morning to buy vegetables. "That Kazik? I swear I saw something black in his ear when he bent down to pick up a fallen coin," said Helena, the pickled herring vendor, in a tone that was both curious and disgusted. "Definitely earwax, but not the usual kind. It's thick like tar." The others burst into laughter, but soon the story spread, from the little riverside tavern where old men played chess to the Kowalska sisters' bakery, where the scent of freshly baked obwarzanek filled the air. Slowly, Kazik's dirty ear became a small-town legend, a mystery no one dared to unravel. After all, Kazik was a kind man, always willing to repair children's watches for free. But the truth was far more complex than the rumors suggested. Kazik was neither lazy nor careless about personal hygiene. He had once been a meticulous man. His shirts always crisp, his leather shoes polished to a shine, and his hair neatly combed like a gentleman from the wartime era. His refusal to clean his ears stemmed from an incident nearly 3 decades ago, back when he worked in a small watch shop in central Krakow. At that time, Kazik had been repairing an 18th century pendulum clock, a valuable antique brought in by a wealthy lady. While carefully adjusting the tiny gears, he accidentally dropped a cotton swab he had used to clean the clock oil into his left ear. He tried to remove it, but the more he poked, the deeper it lodged, ultimately getting stuck somewhere in his ear canal. Too embarrassed to see a doctor, Kazik decided to live with it, convincing himself that it would eventually decompose or fall out on its own. But it never did. Over time, the cotton swab didn't just remain, it became the core of a massive wax buildup. At first, Kazik barely noticed, only occasionally hearing a faint humming sound, like the wind rustling through a wheat field. But as the years passed, the noise grew louder, turning into a ringing, then a buzzing, and finally into strange whispers he couldn't explain. He began to believe that his ear was not just dirty, but haunted. "Must be spirits," he once mumbled to himself at night while sitting by the fireplace, staring into his cup of cold peppermint tea. Yet, he never told anyone, because who would believe such a ridiculous story? The town of Krakowskie Przedmieście was not a place for secrets. Though small, it was filled with nosy people, ears always perked to listen, and mouths that never stopped retelling stories. One day, in mid-March 2025, specifically the 13th, according to the bakery's wall calendar, a young woman named Agnieszka, who had recently moved from Warsaw to work at the local library, happened to overhear the tale of Kazik's ear. Agnieszka was unlike the other townsfolk. She didn't enjoy gossip, but she had a peculiar fascination with the unusual. With her short, curly brown hair, oversized round glasses, and long wool coat that nearly brushed the ground, she looked like she had stepped out of an old book. She decided she had to uncover the truth about Kazik, not to mock him, but because she believed that behind every strange story lay a mystery worth exploring. Agnieszka began her quest by visiting Kazik's house on a drizzly afternoon, when the sky was a dull gray, like an old blanket draped over the town. She knocked on the door, holding a box of freshly baked pastries from the Kowalska bakery as a gift. Kazik opened the door, looking slightly puzzled at the unfamiliar face. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice deep but not unfriendly. "I'm Agnieszka. I work at the library. I heard you're great at fixing watches, so I was wondering if you could repair mine," she said, holding up a small, long broken wristwatch. It was the perfect excuse, and though Kazak was skeptical, he invited her in. Inside, the house smelled of old wood, machine oil, and herbal tea, a strange but comforting mix. Agnieszka sat in a worn-out armchair while Kazak examined the watch with his tools. As he bent forward, she stole a glance at his left ear. Sure enough, something pitch black lurked inside, like a tiny shadowy creature hiding in the depths of his ear canal. She suppressed a shiver but couldn't stop herself from asking, "Kazak, I heard that you never clean your ears. Is that true?" Kazak froze, the small screwdriver in his hand trembling slightly. He lifted his head, his pale blue eyes piercing into Agnieszka's, as if trying to see through her. "Who told you that?" he asked, his voice turning cold. Agnieszka hesitated, but she wasn't one to back down easily. "I heard it at the market, but I don't believe in gossip. I just want to hear the truth from you." A long silence followed, broken only by the rhythmic pattering of rain on the roof. At last, Kazak sighed and set down his tools. "You want the truth? Fine, but don't regret hearing it." And then he began to tell his story, the tale of the lost cotton swab, the enormous wax buildup, and the whispers he heard every night. Agnieszka sat there, both horrified and fascinated, unaware that she was about to embark on a bizarre adventure far beyond her imagination. Kazak spoke in a steady voice, as if he had replayed the story in his mind 1,000 times, but never uttered it aloud. 30 years ago, when I was young, I worked in a watch shop on Florianska Street. One day, a wealthy lady walked in, wearing a fur coat, gold rings on her fingers, carrying an old pendulum clock. She said it had belonged to her family since the time of King Sobieski, and if I damaged it, she would curse me to death. I laughed, thinking she was just trying to scare me. But then, while repairing it, I dropped a cotton swab into my ear. I tried everything to get it out, but it only went deeper. I was too ashamed to see a doctor, afraid they would mock me. So I left it alone. And from then on, everything started to change. Agnieszka leaned forward, her eyes gleaming behind her glasses. How did it change? Kazak furrowed his brows, as if trying to recall details he had long tried to forget. At first, it was a humming sound, like a trapped bee inside my head. I thought it was just earwax buildup, but then it turned into a screeching noise, like a saw cutting through wood. A few years later, I started hearing whispers. Not human voices, but something else, something not of this world. Sometimes it spoke in Old Polish, other times in a language I couldn't understand. I thought I was going insane, but it felt too real. Agnieszka bit her lip, trying to stay calm. Did you ever clearly hear what they were saying? Kazak nodded slowly. Yes. Once on Christmas Eve 10 years ago, I heard one sentence clearly. Release me, or you will be imprisoned forever. I don't know what it meant, but since then, I haven't dared to touch my ear. I'm afraid that if I try to remove the earwax, something else will come out with it. Agnieszka remained silent for a moment, her mind spinning with thoughts. She wasn't superstitious, but she didn't completely dismiss strange occurrences either. Have you ever thought about seeing a doctor? I mean, maybe it's just an auditory hallucination caused by the earwax pressing on your auditory nerve. Kazak let out a dry, brittle laugh, like leaves rustling in the wind. You think I haven't tried? I once went to a doctor in Krakow, sneaking in like a thief. He looked into my ear, then turned pale and said he had never seen anything like it. He wanted to send me to a major hospital in Warsaw, but I refused. I didn't want to become a test subject. Since then, I've lived with it, and it has lived with me. Agnieszka nodded, feeling a chill run down her spine. She didn't know what she was dealing with, science or the supernatural, but she was determined to find out. Kazak, if you allow me, I want to help you. I can do some research and find a solution that doesn't involve a hospital. I promise I won't force you to do anything you don't want to. Kazak looked at her, his eyes filled with a mix of hope and doubt. Why do you care? What do you get out of this? Agnieszka gave him a small smile. I like mysteries, and I think you deserve to live without being haunted by your own ear. From that day on, Agnieszka began her investigation. She spent hours in the library, poring over old medical books, searching online for cases of abnormal earwax, and even delving into materials on magic and Polish folklore. She discovered that the Krakowskie Przedmieście area had a history of mysterious events, from unexplained disappearances in the 17th century to stories of spirits trapped in objects. A handwritten book, transcribed by a Dominican monk in the 18th century, described the curse beneath the dust, an ancient ritual in which the soul of an executed person was sealed within a small object, like an earpick. If the object became lodged inside a living person, the soul would try to escape by whispering into their mind. Agnieszka didn't entirely believe it, but she couldn't ignore the coincidence. Kazik's earpick had fallen into his ear while he was repairing a clock for a lady who claimed to be a descendant of King Sobieski, a historical figure known for his battles and the curses associated with his enemies. She returned to Kazik's house on a cold, windy evening, carrying the book and a small medical flashlight she had borrowed from the library. "Kazik, I think your ear issue isn't just a medical problem. It might be connected to something older. I want to take a closer look, if that's okay." Kazik hesitated, but eventually agreed. He sat down, tilting his head so Agnieszka could shine the light into his left ear. What she saw nearly made her drop the flashlight. A dense, black mass, glistening like tar, with strange, swirling patterns inside, as if it were alive. In the center, she caught a glimpse of something small and white, undoubtedly the earpick, but it seemed to be encased in something far from ordinary earwax. "Kazik, this isn't normal. I think we need to do something, but not in the usual way. I read that if this is a curse, we have to break it by confronting whatever is inside." Kazik's face turned pale. "Confront it? What do you mean?" Agnieszka took a deep breath. "I think you need to listen to the whispers again and respond to them. If it wants to be released, we have to find a way to set it free without harming you." That night, they prepared a simple ritual based on the book. Agnieszka lit a white candle, sprinkled salt around Kazik's chair, and placed a small mirror in front of him to reflect the soul. She wasn't sure if it would work, but she wanted to try everything. Kazik closed his eyes, focusing on the whispers he had tried to ignore for years. This time, they were clearer than ever. "I am Janek, the forgotten one. Release me, or I will drag you down with me." Kazik trembled, but Agnieszka held his hand and whispered, "Ask what he wants." Kazik took a deep breath and spoke loudly. "Janek, what do you need to leave me?" The whispers stopped, then replied, "Take me back to where I died, the old cemetery, beneath the great oak tree." Agnieszka and Kazik exchanged glances. They knew the cemetery, a desolate place on the outskirts of town, where 17th century graves still stood in eerie silence. The next evening, they arrived at the cemetery at sunset, carrying a small wooden box and medical tools Agnieszka had convinced a local nurse to lend her. Under the ancient oak tree, Kazik sat down as Agnieszka carefully used tweezers and saline solution to remove the black mass from his ear. The process was long, painful, and nerve-wracking, but at last the earpick fell out, bringing with it a foul-smelling black substance. As it hit the ground, a sudden cold wind blew past them, and they both heard a gentle sigh, as if someone had just been relieved of a great burden. Kazik collapsed backward, clutching his head, but this time there were no more whispers. He wept, not from pain, but from relief. Agnieszka placed the earpick into the wooden box and buried it beneath the oak tree, as Janek had requested. They left as darkness fully settled in. But the story didn't end there. After that fateful night, Agnieszka couldn't stop thinking about Janek. Who was he? Why was his soul sealed in such a small, insignificant object? And how had it ended up in Kazik's ear? She returned to the library, determined to dig deeper. In the following days, she scoured historical records of the town, from church chronicles to journals of soldiers stationed near the Vistula River. Eventually, she found a clue in an old, tattered notebook written by a priest named Father Wojciech in 1683, the year of the famous Battle of Vienna, where King Jan III Sobieski led Polish forces to defeat the Ottoman Empire. The notebook told the story of a soldier named Janek Kowal, a young blacksmith in Sobieski's army. Janek wasn't a hero. He was a traitor. He was accused of selling information to the Ottomans in exchange for gold, but his plot was uncovered before it could cause serious harm. Instead of a public execution, Sobieski, known for his mix of cruelty and superstition, ordered a court sorcerer to seal Janek's soul inside a small object so he would be eternally forgotten, neither granted salvation nor a name in history. The notebook didn't specify what the object was, but Agnieszka suspected it was the ear pick, perhaps made from bone or wood, an unremarkable yet cursed vessel. After the ritual, Janek's body was hastily buried under the oak tree in the old cemetery, without a gravestone, without a prayer.